Insecure scored 8 Emmy nominations this year and finally ascended into the lofty Best Comedy Series category for the very first time. I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold TV. I'm here with co-star Yvonne Orji, who plays Issa's best friend Molly, who we love, on the show. Yvonne, first of all, congratulations on your first ever Emmy nomination.
Thank you. I still can't get used to hearing that. I saw it on a flyer for something. I was like, oh, that's me. They're talking about me.
Little old me. And you know what? For the rest of your career, no matter what other things you win, you will always be Emmy nominee, maybe winner, Yvonne Orji. So
you can't complain. You think.
You can't complain. Now, where were you when you found out? Were you expecting it, or what was that morning like?
Oh, I was at home. It was 8:30 in the morning in Pacific time here in LA, and we were all prepared to watch it live. What's funny is a couple of us were texting each other, and so when we heard Issa's name, we're sending off texts like, congratulations, girl, and no response. And we're like, okay. So, we're leaving the voice notes like, oh my gosh, you did it. And then when the show got nominated, we did the same thing, like, oh my gosh, finally, we're here, yes. And then go to find out she was in a meeting. I was like, only Issa would have a meeting on a Tuesday at 8:00 in the morning while Emmys are being nominated. And she's like, yeah, it's been 4 years. I'm just going to go ahead with my meeting. Meanwhile, I'm setting an alarm and having morning devotion, lighting candles, God, whatever needs to happen. I know all the votes are counted, but whatever needs to happen. And then the live feed went out and I was like, oh snap. How do I check my category? Yeah. And my publicist Sam called me and was in tears, and she was like, congratulations, I'm so happy. And I was like, I know, right? Me too. The show got nominated and Issa, and she was like, and you too. And I was like, I know, I'm just really happy to be part of the ensemble. It's just so great. And she was like, no, you got nominated for an Emmy. And I was like, me? By myself? So I had to go online and check it out and see for myself. And I was like, oh, that's my name. So nothing was ever the same, but then so much stayed exactly the same.
Oh man, that's a great story. There's a lot of fans of the show who were really thrilled that the Emmys finally properly recognized the show with a bunch of nominations across the board, including you and Issa. What's really interesting though, season 4, for some reason, a lot of people have been saying, I kind of sound like Donald Trump now, but people have been saying that it really hit its stride in season 4. It broke through. People still loved the other seasons, but why do you think season 4 was such a hit?
You know what? I think one, there are a lot of people who were at home, whether forcibly or not, but they were at home to watch it and to really appreciate it and indulge it. I think watching TV in the pandemic, it's there are no distractions, really. You can take in a show and digest it fully, as opposed to okay, I gotta take this show and I gotta go to sleep because I gotta go to work tomorrow and I gotta, it's you can stop and be like, yo, what just happened? That's great. Did you see that? And then, have the interactions with other people. And I think our fans normally do that, but I think especially this season, but also the fact that Issa and I were kind of on the outs, I think not forcing people to choose sides. I think people naturally were like, whose side are we on? And I think it also made them think about their friendship relationships in a way that they were kind of confronted with. We've all had struggles with, especially best friendships, that almost sting more than relationships, than love relationships. And so just being immersed in these two worlds where it's well, who's right and who's wrong? And it's such a blurred line. And am I wrong for thinking that she's wrong? What does that say about me? I think it forced people to ask so many questions about themselves and the show.
It's so relatable. Those little looks that each of them were giving each other towards the end of the like the middle of the season, like we've all been there. Those little breakups you have with your best friends, they are devastating, and we've all been there. And that was so relatable to me. There were times when I wanted to shake Molly and like, stop it, speak up, open up. And I'm like, what shows, that's an emotional reaction I'm having to a TV show. Were you doing that as well when you guys were actually making it?
Well, I think you weren't alone. I think so many people wanted to shake Molly, for better or for worse. Some people wanted to hug her. They were just like, she clearly just needs love because she is the prize. No, I mean, I think it was heartbreaking, especially when you would read a scene and you're like, wait, no, come on, guys, why? No, like, in the table reads, it's like, y'all are making this real hard. Like, it's so visceral sometimes. And we're like, I tell Issa this all the time, and everybody who's a Molly hater, and I say, wait, this all could have been avoided on Thanksgiving when Molly wanted to sit down and talk. She really wanted to talk it out, and Issa didn't. So, things that are left to fester never pan out great.
It takes two to tango. And, I'm low-key trying when Molly sends that text and Issa gets it. I had this reaction like I'm watching Game of Thrones. Like, I was so like, oh, God. And it's that kind of thing that I just think is so relatable.
But it's also, that was like an honest mistake. And if you think about the text, it was really Molly being like, I'm trying. Look at me. I'm taking into account the thing that you said to do, and I'm doing my best. I'm showing up. I'm rallying. I'm growing. It just, Issa interpreted it as, I didn't realize you had to do so much to be my friend.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but we're so fractured, and I do have to do that much. And for me, the conversation outside, that's what gutted me when Molly finally is like, I mean, maybe who you are and who I am, I'm like, no, don't say that.
I know. And then heartbroken Issa gets into the lift and leaves, and
and the camera just stays on her, and she's like, is she crying? Is she's devastated? And you're like, oh, Molly had to say it because she had to be honest, but it was like,
I'm glad she did.
Why did we get here?
I know. And then that was the second last episode. Then we get to Low Key Lost, the season finale, which to me was the best episode of the season. Prentice Penny, written and directed. They have this beautiful emotional wrecking in Mikado at the end. It's so compelling the way Ava Bukovsky, the cinematographer, pans out into the street. We don't get to be part of that conversation. It's too private. And that was the perfect way to end the show. Do you reckon?
Oh, absolutely. That was done purposely, because basically at that point we are saying everything you all have wanted us to say for the whole season. So you don't need to be justified and like, yes, finally, girl, say that. It's just, hey, I'm glad you came. I'm glad you called. Great. Now the same way I believe we all felt with episode 8, when Issa and Lawrence were able to be completely transparent, completely honest, and say things that were hard to hear and receive and digest. I'm praying that that's what Molly and Issa did. Because also, we didn't get to be in on the conversation either. No. I'm praying that that's the level of vulnerability and transparency that they were giving, because at that point, I think they had hit rock bottom. I think the gloves were off, and there's only up to go from here.
Yeah. And life goes on. We're out in the street where people are running around and driving around, and these two ladies are in there sorting stuff out. And that, to me, is a really good way to end the season. It's a good way for us to get on with our lives in this pandemic and to be like, okay, life's got to get on with it, and we're going to have to make peace with shit that we don't like. And I think that's good. So thanks to Insecure for teaching us a lesson. Now, why did you pick the episode? Did you think about what episodes you wanted to choose for submission at the Emmys?
Yeah, it's so funny because this season, while it's still a comedy, there was definitely some heart. There was definitely a lot of heart that was presented. And there was a version where I could have chosen the standalone episode that I did when Loki Trippin', when Alexander, who plays Andrew, and I went to Mexico, and that would have been good. But there was something about just the different levels
Yeah.
in Low Key Lost, right? Because you come, you see them, it's like everything's been building, and they're looking for Tiffany. They have to work together, but they haven't worked together all season. So it's kind of the like, when you're like super mad at somebody and then something else happens that trumps whatever the situation is, and it's like, we have to play nice because our friend is missing. Anything else that's going on between us, it doesn't matter. And so it's just that push and pull. And then I think there's all the levels too. It's like you're on the bus and you hear Tiffany's husband, Derek, talking about, did I know? And, how, like what happened? And you see Molly and Issa kind of like listening, like, is that what happened to us? Were we this lost and we didn't pick up on the signs? And is this a subliminal message? And I think you start seeing all the cold start to thaw.
Yeah.
And then even the level, like in the beginning, Molly is arguing with Andrew about like, hey, if I wanted to stay later at this, at my company's event, you would have been upset. And so you're seeing Molly unravel and then try to keep it together. And then finally, when the payoff at the end, when Andrew tells her, like, what are you fighting for? I thought for me, that was such a moment as an actor. I was like, that was the most tapped in. And it pulled so much out of me emotionally, even though it wasn't humorous, but it was just to see a woman begging to be loved, begging to be understood, begging to be forgiven, begging to not lose. I was like, yeah, this is it. This one is it.
Yeah, I think you made the right choice. It was so deep. I mean, Prentice Penny, he did such a great job writing it, but the directing and the way that you and Issa and Alexander and the whole cast, you really pulled it off. So I'm glad you picked this one.
When I tell you Prentice, I listen. When should I win? I will have to thank Prentice, especially for that moment. He pulled so much out of me that I didn't even know was still there, right? So, you get the script, you have it, and you deliver the lines. I've been this character for 4 years. I get her. I know it. Sure. Yeah. Da, 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 da. And he left the camera rolling for 5 minutes and was like, we're not done. And I'm like, we're not done. And he sat in silence. And so as an actor, you're just like, what is he waiting for? What do I need to do? And then it was literally a process of Andrew and I finding different emotions, finding different levels, and until like the hurt of relationships past, the hurt of friendships past started just welling up. And when you're seeing Molly scramble, it was literally me fishing for all the things I wished I said, wanted to say, didn't say, whatever. And that's where that performance came from.
Yeah, see, he left you guys so exposed. Normally you're safe in your environment and you're giving your performance, but you could really tell that there was something really nuanced about that scene, which brings me to this. Like, Alexander Hodge was so embarrassed to admit that I didn't even know he was Aussie for the first the first 2 seasons I saw him. And then I was watching it with my wife not long ago, and she's like, oh, she talked to him. I'm like, what do you mean he's Aussie? I'm looking him up. So like, wow, Asian Bay, made a really nice impact on the show. What was your highlight about working with him?
When I tell you, I fought so hard, and I will go on record, I fought so hard to get Andrew to have an Australian accent on the show.
Damn.
To which everyone was like, no, girl, not a thing that's going to happen. I was like, but why? Because they were like, well, that's the kind of Asian guy Molly would go for. The Australian foreigner, like, no, why can't he just be Asian from LA? And I'm like, I mean, you're right, though. Molly would go for that. Like, they were like, we need there to be, some kind of apprehension. And like, anybody with a phenomenal accent is going to be like, ooh, keep talking. Say what now? And so, no, and Andrew was amazing. Alexander was amazing. And, I think anytime you have kind of like fresh energy, new blood coming into a show, it shakes things up for you a little bit. And obviously with Issa and I on the men's, on the outs, I would say Alexander and I got to be closer than even Issa and I this season. And so working with a scene partner that's so generous, that's so kind, that's so gracious, and also like such a professional, right? And I was like, oh wait, okay, you know what? Let's run lines. Okay, you want to try this scene? Like we were almost like pushing each other to be better than the last thing, and it was great. It was absolutely phenomenal.
It reminded me that when we're in this day and age, obviously, with a lot of social upheaval, Black Lives Matter, and the things that we're seeing on the news that mean a lot to so many people. This show is about the experiences of contemporary African-American women. It's got Alexander Hodge, he's also a person of color. And I was just wondering, like, given there's a great scene in Low Key Tripping when Molly gets a backup at Andrew's brother, and that racial politics comes out even amongst so-called minorities. I just wonder, what does that kind of strike a nerve with you, that this show is going to places that are sometimes a little bit uncomfortable?
No, this is strike a nerve, and thank you for also putting minorities in quotation, because I'm like, how can we the minority again? I don't understand. For that, I was like, numbers don't lie.
Why are they called minor? I don't even know what that means, but go ahead.
It's actual branding. That's what it is. It's branding.
Yeah.
And it's bad branding, but it's anyway, we're reversing it. It didn't strike a nerve. What it proved was that it was so necessary. And what's crazy is that episode came out literally the week of George Floyd's murder. And when there was an Asian cop that stood by and watched him die. And it was just like, this is literally the kind, like, art imitating life in the worst way. Like, because I'm like, we would rather not have this be the reality, but let's talk about it, because it is the reality, and we can't hide from it or shelter ourselves from it. And what I love about the show is that it's never on the nose. It's never like, hey, this is what we want you to believe. It's always like, we're throwing up this conversation and we're allowing it to be the spark that makes everyone else have their own conversation with this moment. And, I appreciated just even the gall to go there, right? Because all people of color, sometimes they do things, like it's showing how even when we're grouped as people of color, there's still division. When it's like, we would be stronger if we were more unified. Like, so like, there are more of us than them, and it's just like, the more we try to hold on to the things that divide us, the less strength we have. And I think that was what that, one of the conversations I think that was trying to spark. It's like, it's not for convenience sake, because you may think, okay, you're the model minority, but then something will happen in your community that won't benefit you either. So it's really just whenever the folks in charge decide they want to be cool with you today and then don't want to be cool with you tomorrow. So it would be in your best interest not to kind of get sucked into this notion of like, we're good, and forget the folks that aren't good.
Yeah. And you can extrapolate that to everybody. As an outsider, I watch a show like Insecure and I learn a lot about American society, and the things that don't occur to me because I come from a different experience. Just like you're from Africa, you come from a different experience, and you're learning the American way as now that you live there and you are American as well. And I just wonder, like, given that you've got your show Mama, I Made It, which I thought was so funny. You come out looking like $1 million, and then you get to see some of the scenes in Lagos, which looks like this huge, like massive, sprawling city that many of us have never seen before. How exciting was it for you to bring your roots to a new audience?
It was the delight of my heart. It was literally, when you have a vision that's so specific and so crystallized in your mind, and you're just like, if I can just do this, I'll be happy. And then you do that thing and you're like, I'm happier than I thought I would be. It was just so meaningful for me to be able to like bring the cameras back home and to also just give my parents, I mean, selfishly, I just wanted to give my parents shine. You know, I wanted to give them a moment and an opportunity to be like, I appreciate all the sacrifices you guys made. Now it's your turn to tell your side of the story as much as possible. But then when I got the responses of people saying, you know, I have African-American friends that hit me up and said, I feel like you lent me your family for 60 minutes. Like like your roots, like my roots are stronger because I'm seeing what your roots look like. Like, I'm just like, what? And it's just that sometimes you're doing the thing that's like, that makes the most sense to you and not even realizing the impact it can make on so many different levels. And then when I hear that, I'm like, oh man, it was so worth it. Because there is a generation of African Americans that lineage, that heritage is like has been stripped from them. Yeah. And so just to even give a piece of like, this is what it looks like in real time. And like, no, there are not, you know, bloated bellies and mosquitoes. You know, like they're fashionable young Nigerians who are entrepreneurs. And, you know, this is what the market looks like. And this is how we haggle. And this is like, you know, it's almost kind of like, especially for Black people in America, I imagine it's like seeing all the footage and like, it's just all Black people walking the street. It's just all Black people. And wow. It really is. When I see a white person in Nigeria, I'm like, do you work for the oil companies? Like, I'm like,
why are you here?
What are you here for?
Wow, that is so interesting. We could talk about this all day, but you know what? We've run out of time. Everybody go to Gold Derby, make your predictions. Maybe you want to predict Yvonne, and in the meantime, Yvonne, thank you so much for your time, and good luck in the virtual Emmys this year. You never know, you could even win.
You never know, and I'll take your well wishes. I appreciate you.